If you're a teacher who's thinking about leaving, but the unknown feels overwhelming, you're not alone. Leaving the classroom can feel like walking into unfamiliar territory, and it's hard to move forward when you can't see the path, or worse, when you feel like you're stuck in a hole. I've been there. That uncertainty, that hesitation, that's normal, but you don't have to navigate it alone. I'm Vanessa Jackson. I spent 25 years in the classroom, and I've also worked inside the hiring world, helping people get jobs and understand how those systems really work. Now, I help teachers just like you navigate that in-between space so that you can move out of burnout and into a career outside the classroom that actually fits. This is Teachers in Transition. Let's get you out and into what's next. Hi, welcome back to Teachers in Transition. I'm Vanessa Jackson, your host. I taught in the classroom for 25 years before leaving the classroom and working in corporate America. Now I work for teachers, helping them figure out what's next. And if you're new to the podcast, welcome. I am especially glad that you are here. This is the place where we help teachers explore what's next, whether that's finding more joy where you are, discovering a new career path, or simply looking at all too familiar challenges from a different perspective. Today, we are going to talk about why quicksand turned out to be a much bigger problem in life than any of us GenX kids expected, and why your greatest strengths as a teacher can sometimes become your biggest blind spot. Then, in this week's Teacher Hack, I'll share one simple strategy to help keep you out of that quicksand. And finally, in our career transition and job search segment, we'll talk about the difference between running away from teaching and running away from exhaustion, because those aren't always the same thing. Let's dive in. When I was a kid, it seemed like quicksand was going to be one of the biggest hazards of adult life. It was everywhere. It was on TV, adventure movies, cartoons, even Gilligan's Island had quicksand. If you grew up in the 70s or 80s, you just assumed that sooner or later you were going to have to figure out how to escape from it. As it turns out, most of us made it to adulthood without ever encountering a single patch of quicksand. My entire generation kind of laughs about that now, right alongside all the other things that we were told as kids that never quite panned out, like, you'll never have a calculator in your pocket all the time, or your eyes will stick like that if you kept rolling them. And for those of you who can't see me because you've got the audio-only version, you guessed it, I just rolled my eyes. The funny thing is, I don't actually think we were wrong about quicksand. I think we were just looking for the wrong kind. The most dangerous quicksand I've ever encountered wasn't made of sand at all. It was made of tiny changes that happened so gradually, I never recognized I was sinking in. That's the scary part about metaphorical quicksand. It doesn't swallow you all at once. It lets you adjust and compensate, one micro measurement at a time. I've been thinking about that a lot this week because, as I have shared, I've been on a bit of a health journey this year, and I freely shared it because I think hiding things makes it seem shameful somehow. Back in January, I had a hysterectomy, and I still think that was one of the best decisions I ever made. If I could go back and do it again, the only thing that I would change is that I would have done it sooner. What I didn't know at that time was that the surgery had kicked my psoriatic arthritis into a flare. A flare is just acceleration of disease activity, and that flare didn't arrive like a lightning strike. It was more like quicksand. Here's where I think this connects to teachers. We are incredibly good at adapting. In fact, I would argue that adapting is one of our superpowers. The copier breaks, we figure it out. Half the class is absent, we figure it out. The lesson you spent all weekend planning somehow falls completely flat. We adjust on the fly and figure that out. That's what we do, and we're proud of it. We solve our problems all day long, and without anyone ever realizing that there was a problem to begin with. The trouble is that our bodies do not care whether we are good problem solvers. As my autoimmune flare slowly grew worse, I just kept explaining everything away. I thought maybe I just needed to get more sleep, even though I was having trouble sleeping. Maybe I just needed to eat more protein. Maybe I just wasn't working out enough. Maybe I needed to be more disciplined. And then walking got a little harder. Exercise got harder. I was taking naps almost every day, but I kept assuming there had to be a simple explanation because that's what I would have told someone else. Meanwhile, I have a Garmin watch. I know many of you like Apple Watches, but I'm a Garmin girl. And my Garmin watch was quietly trying to tell me a different story. My stress stayed high. My sleep was not restorative anymore. My body battery was never really recharging. It was never even getting to a quarter charged. Looking back, the data was trying to get my attention long before I was paying attention. The irony is that my watch noticed that I was sinking before I did. I just didn't realize what it was telling me. That's what quicksand does. It doesn't announce itself. It looks exactly like regular sand until you realize that you're standing knee-deep in it. Sometimes your superpower can become your blind spot. Endurance and resilience have been some of my personal Wonder Twin superpowers most of my life. I keep going. I get the job done. The more I've thought about it this past week, the more I realized I was asking the wrong questions. I kept asking, what caused this? Was it the surgery? Was it the autoimmune flare? Was it not sleeping well? Was it stress? And I was looking for that one thing that I could point to and say, there, that's the problem, because I would like to avoid that in the future. But I don't think that's how this works. And as I've been piecing everything together, in medicine there's this phrase when looking to figure out what's wrong that says, when you hear hooves, you think horses, not zebras. In other words, look for common explanations, not chasing rare diseases. And I knew there were no wild zebras causing issues, but I was starting to wonder if perhaps there wasn't more than one horse involved. Which is why I keep coming back to this quicksand metaphor. You don't notice yourself sinking because every inch becomes your new normal. You don't wake up one morning waist deep in your quicksand. You wake up one morning and realize you've been standing in it for months, but you're not quite sure how you got there. And then, just when I thought I had a planned path out of the quicksand that had been engulfing me with increasing intensity for the last several months, things got worse. Saturday started out as a really meaningful day. I was playing piano for a celebration of life service at church. If you've never been the musician at a funeral, it's a little hard to explain the role. You're not the center of attention, and that's how it's supposed to be, but you carry the emotion of the room the entire time. You watch people grieve, you're trying to support the people in the room, and you're concentrating so you don't miss an entrance or lose your place. And by the end of the service, you're kind of tired in a way that does not make sense with your step counter. On my way out, I grabbed lunch because I had another plan for the afternoon. I believe in donating blood whenever I can, and I encourage everyone to do so if they can. My blood type is one that blood banks are always happy to see, and since I had a window where I was eligible, I wanted to use it before my new medication regimens kicked in from that quicksand experience and prevented it. The donation itself couldn't have gone better. I had one of those easy veins that every vampire loves. Everything went quickly. Everyone was friendly. They thanked me for coming in, handed me the usual instructions, and I walked thinking I had done a good thing that day. And then I stepped outside. It's one of those Texas afternoons where the heat doesn't just hit you, it wraps itself around and through you. And I started walking towards my car, and immediately something felt off. The best way I know how to describe it is that my feet suddenly felt farther away than they should have. I know that sounds strange, but I've had a few of these episodes before over the years, and I recognize the feeling almost immediately. I remember fumbling with my keys because all I wanted to do was get the car started and get the air conditioner going. I got in the car, I leaned the seat back, I turned that air on full blast, and then everything went dark. When I started coming back around, I knew exactly where I was, but I wasn't exactly firing on all cylinders yet. If you've ever had anesthesia, it's a little bit like that. Your brain is awake enough to have thoughts, but not awake enough to trust your thoughts. And my first thought was, okay, how do I get home? Not, I should call for help. Not, I should go back inside the blood bank. My brain went into problem-solving mode. because it's my superpower. I actually caught myself thinking, well, maybe I can drive a little bit, and then if I feel bad again, I'll just pull over and wait. And before you start yelling at your podcast that, yes, this was a terrible idea. And fortunately, the rational part of my brain was slowly coming back online as well. And I sat there for several more minutes with the air on my face. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized there was no way that I should be driving. There was no way I could drive. So I did something that I almost never do. I asked for help. Since everyone else I knew was out of range and otherwise unavailable, I called my brother. In my 54 years of life, I have never reached out to him in a state of such vulnerability and simply asked for help. He immediately came to get me, drove me home, and all I wanted in the entire world was to crawl into my own bed, turn the room into an icebox, point a fan directly at my face, and sleep. And that's exactly what I did. To say that I am grateful that he was available undersells it. Otherwise, I'd have had to call 911, and my brother understood me when I was not all there in a way a dispatcher couldn't have. The strange thing about these episodes is that when you wake up later, you don't just bounce back to normal. I always describe it as feeling like I'm recovering from the flu. I've heard it described as a vasovagal hangover. It's like your body did the whole turn it off and on again thing that we begrudgingly try for computers after trying everything else first. But my body is still running several steps behind. Everything takes more energy than it should. You're tired in a way that's hard to explain unless you've experienced yourself. The next day, after sleeping, I noticed something that has happened before. My brain came back online before the rest of me did. Physically, I did still feel like I'd been hit by a truck. Everything felt like it took more effort than it should have. I felt like I was dragging myself through Jell-O, and I was definitely not going to go for a run or a marathon or even a drive across town. I wasn't even sure I could make it across the backyard. But there's always one part of my brain that stays coldly logical, even when everything else is falling apart. I've named it the observer. It wants to understand everything. It asks why about absolutely everything, and it has never met a mystery it didn't want to solve. Looking back, I probably shouldn't be surprised. I started reading mystery novels before I could ride a bicycle. And the observer wanted answers. What actually happened? At first, I was looking for one answer because that's what we like. We like neat little explanations. Was it donating blood? Was it the heat? Had one of the medications caused a problem? I kept looking for a reason. Because again, if I could identify that one cause, then surely I could prevent this from ever happening again. But I don't think that's how this works. Earlier I commented about that axiom, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. And I was sure at this point there was more than one horse pulling the wagon. The more I walked back through my weekend, the more horses I found. I had been dealing with an autoimmune flare that had been getting worse for months. My body had gone through some significant medication changes. Saturday morning had been emotionally demanding in ways I didn't fully appreciate at the time. It was a brutally hot Texas afternoon. I donated blood. I already knew that I had a tendency towards the occasional fainting episode under the wrong circumstances, although to be fair, they had always been in a plane until now. If you had handed me that list, one item at a time, I probably looked at every single one of those things and said, that's manageable. What I completely missed was that they weren't arriving one at a time. They all showed up together on the same day. I was looking at a whole team, all pulling the wagon in the same direction, right into a trap of quicksand. And as I mentally walked back through everything that had happened, I realized this wasn't really just my story. I think this is how teachers get into trouble. It's not because we're careless. It's actually the opposite. We're incredibly resourceful. We adapt, we compensate, we push through. Those are the very skills that make us exceptional educators. But also the skills that can quietly hide a problem from us for months. Think about the first few weeks of every school year. Nobody sleeps enough. Everybody's feet hurt. Your voice is tired. Your shoulders ache. Or your knee, or your back, or your neck, or whatever. You're carrying things you haven't carried all summer. You're walking more steps than you've walked in months. You're making hundreds of decisions before lunch. And by the time you get home, you collapse into a chair and think, ain't no tired like teacher tired. And let's be honest, teacher tired isn't a phrase that developed by accident. Every teacher listening to this knows exactly what those two words mean. It is a very specific kind of exhaustion. It's physical, it's mental, it's emotional, it's decision fatigue, all rolled into one. Sometimes teacher tired becomes the explanation for everything. You stop noticing that your knees hurt a little more than they did last month. You stop noticing that you need another cup of coffee just to make it through first period. You stop noticing that you're canceling plans with friends because you're just too exhausted. Every little change makes sense by itself, so you adapt. Then you adapt again. And then you adapt to the adaptation. And that's why I keep coming back to quicksand. You don't notice yourself sinking because every inch becomes the new normal. Before long, you're not asking, why am I so tired? You're asking, why can't I keep up anymore? Maybe you're not losing your work ethic. Maybe you just lost your reserve. Maybe you've been standing in quicksand longer than you realized. That's the part I wish someone had told me months ago. If your body keeps quietly changing the terms of the agreement, don't automatically assume you're the problem. Don't immediately decide that you've become lazy or weak or undisciplined, or that you've lost the work ethic that carried you through every challenge you faced before. Ask better questions. Could something else be going on? Could your body be asking for help in a language that you've gotten so good at ignoring that you don't even recognize it anymore? I know that's not always an easy question to answer. And maybe it's something simple. Maybe you're low on vitamin D. Maybe you're iron deficient. Maybe you've been burning the candle at both ends for too long. Maybe there is a sleep problem. Sometimes it's something much more significant. The point isn't that you should diagnose yourself. The point is that you shouldn't dismiss yourself either. Teachers spend their entire careers paying attention to everyone else in the room. We notice when a student is struggling. We notice when a colleague seems off. We notice when someone needs encouragement, a snack, or a quiet word in the hallway. We're just not nearly as good at noticing it in ourselves. Your superpower can become your blind spot. If that line lands a little close to home today, I want you to hear one more thing. Be as nice to yourself as you would to a best friend going through a hard time. Quicksand looks exactly like regular sand until you start to sink. And if it took you a while to realize what was happening, that doesn't make you foolish, it makes you human. This brings me to our teacher hack of the week. Our teacher hacks are designed to save you in one of the three ways that we pay for things in life: time, money, or stress. This one's all about saving you some stress. As you're heading back to school, find yourself a battle buddy. Now, if you've listened to the podcast for a while, you know I've talked about battle buddies before. The military figured out a long time ago that people make better decisions when someone else is watching their six or their back. I think teachers need that too. But this time I want you to find a battle buddy with a different assignment. Ask them to pay attention to you. Not your lesson plans, not whether you've graded your papers, not whether you're drinking enough water. Ask them to notice you. Give them permission to say, you don't seem like yourself lately, or you've looked exhausted for a couple of weeks now, or when was the last time you went to sleep at a decent hour? Because here's the thing. The people around us sometimes notice the slow changes long before we do. They see us by comparison. We see ourselves in our adaptations. Every day feels almost like the day before, so we normalize one more ache, one more skipped meal, one more restless night, one more afternoon where we collapse on the couch. Sometimes your battle buddy won't be another teacher at all. In fact, sometimes that's even better. Might be your spouse, an adult child, a neighbor, a friend from church, a friend from high school, a friend who sees you often enough to recognize when you have stopped looking like yourself, but who isn't living inside the same teacher whirlwind that you are. And if they tell you they're worried, don't get defensive, get curious. Channel your inner Ted Lasso there. Let your own inner observer ask, what are they seeing that I'm not? Because sometimes the first person to notice that you are standing in quicksand isn't the one standing in it. And they're the ones in the best position to throw you a lifeline. And now we're going to move into the career transition and job search segment, where you get some practical tips and advice to help you navigate a career change. One of the hardest parts of career transition is figuring out what you're actually trying to escape. Are you trying to leave teaching, or are you trying to leave exhaustion? Because those aren't always the same thing. If your health is quietly changing the terms of the agreement, or if you're so burned out that every day feels like survival mode, it's incredibly difficult to make a clear career decision. Everything looks bad when you're running on empty. It's a little bit like going to the grocery store while you're ravenous and walking out the proud owner of aisle 4. So before you make a permanent decision about your profession, make sure that you're paying attention to yourself as carefully as you're paying attention to your resume. I don't think these are decisions you should make entirely by yourself. They're usually better made in conversation with another person. And if you have someone in your life who can be that neutral but invested voice, that's wonderful. If not, that's one of the things that I do, especially in a complimentary discovery call. Sometimes all you need is a perspective, a different perspective, to help separate burnout from a genuine desire for change. If you're considering a career transition, absolutely start exploring your options. Learn what's out there. See what skills you might need to pick up. Just don't confuse exhaustion with clarity. Sometimes the right answer is a new career. Sometimes the right answer is a new school. Sometimes the right answer is better boundaries, or better health care, better sleep, or maybe getting an illness that's been quietly stealing your energy under better control. The point is this: make the biggest career decisions of your life with as much of you available as possible. You'll make better decisions from solid ground than you ever will standing in that quicksand. So if today's episode resonated with you, there are a few ways that you can help me. First, if you know a teacher who needs to hear this conversation, please share this episode with them. I think it's an important one about health. Word of mouth is still the biggest way that this podcast grows, and you never know whose day might change because you hit send. If you feel led to support the podcast financially, you can do that for as little as $3 a month. That support makes it possible for this little mission to keep growing. It's one of the reasons we're now branching out into video podcasts and a YouTube channel so that we can reach and even help more teachers. If you're in that place where you're wondering whether it's time for a career transition, I would love to talk with you. I offer complimentary discovery calls because sometimes you just need another set of eyes on the situation. Someone who's invested in helping you find the right answer, whether that's staying in education, changing schools, or building a path into something else entirely new. And finally, I'm writing a book. You might have heard me mention it. It's still making its way through the publishing process, but as we get closer, I'm going to be looking for people who believe in this mission enough to help launch it into the world. We'll be using something like a crowdfunding model that's a little different from traditional publishing, and I'll be sharing more about that over the next few weeks because the timing on it really matters. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for choosing to spend some of your precious time with me and Teachers in Transition. Until next week, pay attention to the little things. They have a way of adding up, sometimes for the better, and sometimes they're the first sign that you're standing in quicksand. That's the podcast for today. If you liked this podcast, tell a friend. And don't forget to rate and review wherever you listen to your podcast. It helps the podcast grow. Tune in weekly to Teachers in Transition, where we discuss job search strategies as well as stress management techniques and motivation. And I want to hear from you. Please reach out and leave me a message at vanessa@teachersintransition.com. You can also leave a voicemail or text at 512-640-9099. I'll see you here again next week, and remember, you are amazing.